Hey everybody, it's Thursday afternoon. Do you know what that means? It's time to talk about this week's episode of An Archdemon's Dilemma. Are you ready? Because I sure am. I can't wait to get into this and to talk about everything that happened. Let's get this started. Kicking things off on a super positive note, the first thing I want to say is that I really loved how we actually opened the episode and how we actually get to see that Zagan is making some progress in his ability to communicate with Nephy. And we see that in the most simple way ever because he's just able to actually naturally say good morning. And he seems so proud of himself for that. And I don't blame him because he was totally struggling to do something that normal in the last episode. And here we see him actually able to make that happen, which was really cute. As we continue through the first part of the episode, we see a lot more coverage of how his social anxiety actually works. And I think that this author who wrote this really seems to get what that means and what it entails for a person who is living with it and the kinds of impact it can have on a person who is living with somebody who has it. And one of the ways I really like most that is done is in showing a positive aspect of social anxiety, which is what happens when somebody who has this actually gets to start talking about things that they are actually passionate about and confident in their ability to speak on. Because a lot of times what seems to happen when people have social anxiety is that they struggle with being able to connect what they're thinking in their brain and what's coming out of their mouth, and they're terrified that they're going to mess it up somewhere in the process and end up embarrassing themselves or making somebody not like them anymore, or just any number of other social faux pas or nightmares. But when they actually get a chance to talk about something that they feel confident in, that shyness and that self-consciousness can actually totally go away. And when that happens, you can actually get to see what kind of person is really in there and just how much fun they can be. I think that it's really cool how they did this with Zagan though, because not only did they actually address his social anxiety in doing this, but they addressed something about the way that he values Nephy as well. The thing that Zagan is super good at talking about is actually sorcery. And one of the things that Zagan explains several times in this episode in varying ways is the idea that it's important for a person to have power. And he really values that because when he was a kid and was very vulnerable and was abused and almost killed, one of the reasons that he feels that happened to him was that he had a lack of power. And one of the reasons he feels that he was able to survive is that he obtained power. What makes this special when we see him talking about sorcery with Nephy is that he is taking this girl that he essentially purchased as a slave, even if he had no ill intent toward her. And in giving her this information, he is increasing her hypothetical power because he's giving her knowledge, which when you're trying to control someone is a forbidden thing. And he's doing so and actually offering to help her understand things better and everything. And he's praising her when she gets things and all that kind of stuff. And it's just really beautiful because it shows that he cares more about helping her not feel helpless and powerless than he does about actually holding power and sway over her. The reason I talk about power like this when I talk about it is that, in my opinion, there are two things in this world that people use to influence other people. And it doesn't matter whether it's the king of a nation or whether it's your obnoxious brother who went into the fridge and drank all the milk. There is power and there is persuasion. Power is when you take something or someone and you force it to do what you want it to do without any kind of reasoning. I am stronger than you, therefore you will do this. Persuasion is when you want someone to do something and you convince them. It is basically the distinction between compulsion and convincing someone to do something. And I think that's a really important theme within this episode. Sorry to pause and spell something out that's probably really obvious, but I wanted to make sure that people understand the point of view I'm coming at that with, because it's something that I think is really important within this story. Another thing that happens in this episode is that we get the iconic and totally adorable scene where Nephy ends up sitting in Zagan's lap as they are having food. And it's really interesting how the context of this scene actually works in the show, because it has a lot more to it than what it would appear when you see it in the trailer. It's actually used in a way that I thought was really smart. Nephy has prepared food for Zagan. She's also prepared the table and she's prepared a chair. But as per usual Nephy behavior, she hasn't prepared anything for herself. So Zagan is like, okay, you can share my food. And then he's like, come on and sit down. And there's nowhere for her to sit. So he taps her lap and she ends up sitting there. And she is blushy as hell and she is embarrassed. And he notices that she is blushy and embarrassed. And then, despite the fact that he's totally happy having her there, he decides that he will tell her that next time that she sets the table, she should make sure there is enough food for both of them. And, more importantly, that she should make sure there are 2 seats, otherwise she can gladly sit with him in his lap again if she would like. The reason I think this is really important, and I think the reason that he does this, is because he is still continuing to work toward making sure that Nephy actually has her own autonomy. Because the thing is, Zagan has feelings for Nephy, and he actually really cares about her. But so long as there is a power divide between him being her master and her being a slave or a servant, that's never going to work. Because she can't actually choose whether or not she would want to be with him. She is separated from him through status alone, and then also through her own emotional inability to make any choice that is actually for her own benefit. And he seems to really be trying to help her break free of that, which I think is really important and that I think is really precious. From this point on, we get to a section of the story where we actually get to more of a outsiders coming to Zagan's home kind of deal, and we actually get a bit of fighting to break up all of the talking heads and internal monologue and stuff that's been going on. That's because Chastel and her knights have shown up, as we saw the church talking about needing to get rid of Zagan because they think he is the one who actually kidnapped the girls. Whether they believe it or not, they want him gone, so they're using this as a pretext at worst. So, Chastel has done her duty and has shown up and is ready to do her thing. What people don't know is that Chastel actually has a plan to make it look like she killed Zagan and is trying to tell Zagan that he should accept her offer, give up magic, and live a normal life. But Zagan is like, hell no, I don't think so. And rightfully so for him to say that, given everything he's experienced. The point that he makes to Chastel, which I thought was really clever, is, okay, so you think my sorcery is all about oppression and control and hurting other people and enforcing my will on others, and yet you are the one who showed up at my home with soldiers to attack and try to kill me, and you think that you are not an oppressive force? I got news for you. And I don't blame him in the slightest for this, because he's absolutely correct. It goes back to what I was talking about power earlier. This is the thing. When something is happening and it is you enforcing something on those you disagree with, you will think that it's justice. When somebody shows up and tries to impose their will upon you, you will think that is oppression. And the distinction, obviously, is who has more power to actually force somebody to do something. And it's a sad reality that we live in a world where people think like that, but there are so many people who think that life is a zero-sum game where only one person can win, so they want to be at the top, whether that's on an individual level where people mess with each other, or whether it is in higher standings of things like governments and churches and stuff like that. So it was really interesting to see him have that take. I thought that was really clever. The really exciting aspect of this whole situation actually happens when Nephy actually comes out of the castle from what she was doing. I think she was making dinner or something. And she realizes that there's a confrontation going on. One of the guards see her. He immediately goes to attack her. He's going to hurt her. But Zagan gets between them, and the blade that the soldier is using actually ends up going through Zagan's hand. Well, Nephy totally loses it. And this is where we find out that Nephy has never been as helpless as we might have actually thought. Nephy has always had access to something that could hypothetically protect herself, but Nephy has never felt a reason to use it, which, given all the crap she's been through, is really kind of heartbreaking. But I mean, we don't know exactly how powerful her stuff is, so I mean, it's a gamble, but it's a gamble she uses here to protect Zagan. Nephy has really amazing nature powers, and she shoots roots out of the ground. She grabs the soldier, she ends up wrapping him up, and she is about to take him out until Zagan is like, wait, no, don't do that. And she immediately stops. She immediately lets the soldier go, and she immediately does what Zagan asks of her, which indicates 3 things to us. 1, Nephy wanted to protect Zagan. too. If Nephy wanted to deal with Zagan, I mean, it might be an even match, but she could have done something at any time. The collar that she is wearing might be preventing her from using mana. It hasn't been preventing her from being able to do something to protect herself. She just hasn't felt any inclination to do that because she's been so surrounded by despair from all the other people around her, and then probably because she's really liked how Zagan has treated her and has felt no need to do that around him. Finally, it shows us that Nephy has at least some level of control over these powers, that any kind of emotional connection that people have established between her and those powers, making her feel bad about them, has been about some kind of racial prejudice, or at least skill prejudice, rather than because of some reason where she did something to make people feel any kind of actual fear toward her necessarily. And I think that's really important to think about, because I think that for Nephy, her bad situation didn't start with being captured. Nephy hasn't had an easy life, and from what it seems from her backstory, nobody has ever cared about her until Zagan showed up. So the idea of actually doing things to protect herself or in her own interests are things that have been shut off from her. And it's only now with his help that she's getting any closer to actually being able or willing to do that stuff. Once Chastel picks her men up and gets the hell out of Dodge, we actually get a scene back in the castle where Zagan and Nephy actually talk a little bit more about their own backstories to each other, because Nephy still feels really awful about showing her powers, and she's really self-conscious about it. And she feels very ashamed for her past, as she explains to Zagan, because one of the things that she did was she was like actually feeling happy when the people in her village were dying and she was captured and taken into captivity. She didn't care about what was going to happen to her. Her life already felt worthless, so it didn't matter. But she felt those people were a bunch of jerks because they had mistreated her from the day she was born and had treated her nasty because of the color of her hair. And then she actually feels remorse for feeling the way that she felt about them as she was taken away and as they died, because she felt that that kind of morality was wrong. And Zagan, first about her powers, is like, don't worry about that. I don't care about that. The only thing I care about is that you are Nephy and that you are here with me, which I thought was really precious, because I think she needs to hear something like that. I think that's really important. And as far as her situation with the people, Zagan actually comforts her in a roundabout way where I was just like, oh, because the way he said it, which makes sense for him in his past, but it was very socially awkward in the way he said it, but it was great. He actually tells her, like, yo, if it had been me, I would have taken out the guards and everything that came in to attack you guys. I would have taken out those pricks and I would have burnt the town down. And Nephy's just like, okay. Because obviously Nephy, I think, is a little softer than Zagan is about most things, but holy crap, dude. Like, that was definitely one way to tell her what you thought about that. But I'll take it. His heart was in the right place. The last thing that I want to talk about this situation, especially with this ending, is the fact that once they've talked everything out, she actually breaks down and she starts to cry. And I wondered how he was going to react to that, given how much he talks about power and control and strength and self-reliance. But he did a really great job. He didn't criticize her. He didn't question her tears. He didn't do any of that. She actually came closer to him and he just hugged her. And it was just the most precious thing. He somehow knew, despite all of his social awkwardness, that this was a moment where he should close his damn mouth and just hug her and just let her be. Because this is a girl, in my opinion, who is probably so long due for a damn good cry. And it was just, it felt like I had just cried and had that kind of release over something happening to me, watching her go through that and watching him, like, just hugging her and comforting her. It was that beautiful. I really loved this episode. I thought it was really heartfelt, and I think that it did a lot, both to help us get more plot to move along, and also to show a great deal more about these characters, because these characters are so interesting. These characters can really hold a good chunk of an episode, even on their own. It's nice seeing the breakups inside of the story where there is more direct conflict and plot B and stuff like that, but the relationship between these two really does seem like it is the plot A, and they're doing a great job so far with making sure that what is going on with them is really and truly interesting. Anyway, I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about today for episode 3, and I will see you guys in the next video. Talk to you later. Bye!